welcome to another episode of Let Me Get This Straight. Thank you for joining. We'd like to first know where you are joining from. So let me know, city, state, in this great nation that you're tuning in from. And if you're tuning in from outside this great nation, please let me know. So, the Jussie Smollett trial has begun. Most of you probably haven't even heard of that because there's so many other distractions going on in the world and the media today. But the trial of Jussie Smollett is underway and will most likely be wrapping up. I believe the prosecution has rested, I believe, from what I have read. So what I'm going to talk about today are some of the details that most people have not heard about and most people don't know. If you aren't familiar with the Jussie Smollett incident, I'm going to review that today, and I'm going to share with you some of the things that you most likely haven't heard and the media hasn't let you know about. So we're going to jump right into it. So in 2019, Jussie Smollett, who is an actor on the show Empire, which I don't even know if that show is still on TV. It was a show I never watched, apparently a popular show, but I didn't watch it and I don't know anything about it. Apparently, he, for some reason, was upset that he received a letter to him anonymously, and it had a stick figure drawn on it with a noose and a gun pointing at the stick figure. And if you've heard of any of this, go ahead and chime in, let me know. You could throw a hands up emoji out there to let me know. So after that happened, the studio that he was working for that was filming the show Empire apparently didn't take it serious enough when he received this anonymous letter. And folks, what I'm going to talk to you about today are some of the things that anyone with a little bit of common sense would take a look at and say, hold on a second, that does not make sense. So we had some of the most seasoned reporters in our country interviewing Jussie Smollett. And during these interviews, we're not asking certain questions that most of us were asking, and we're wondering, but they weren't asking these questions. And we want to know why that wasn't, why that didn't happen. So anyhow, after the studio didn't take this letter he received seriously enough, he decided that he was going to stage a hate crime. Now, this hate crime was going to involve a few different things. It was going to involve the color of his skin. He's a light-skinned, very light-skinned black male. This is going to involve his sexuality, the fact that he's a gay man, and it's going to involve the fact that he was apparently a Democrat, liberal, and voted or supported the Hillary Clinton or Democrats in general. Now, a little backstory, and these are some of the details that people don't know about. I've talked to officers that work in Chicago, and these are some of the things that the general public doesn't know about. So, that I'm going to share with you. And these are all being released now in the trial, which of course no one is seeing because, well, listen, if someone is accused of being a, whatever you want to call him, militia guy, and, now we see shot at people in self-defense, that trial is going to be live streamed and everyone's going to be able to tune in. But this trial, no one's going to be able to see. So we're getting the details that are kind of slowly being bled out to us. Okay. So, and I'm going to talk about one of the things that is actually most troubling that a lot of people don't really want to talk about, but I'm going to say it because it needs to be said. So anyway, he didn't get enough attention for this anonymous note that he received. So he decided to stage this crime, and it was going to involve his color of his skin, his sexual orientation, and his political affiliation. Now, his claim was, and now he needed to stage this because living in Chicago, apparently he didn't feel like it was going to happen naturally. So in the neighborhood in Chicago he lived, his story was at approximately 2 o'clock in the morning. It was, I believe, January, dead of winter in Chicago. Temperatures were below zero. At 2 in the morning, he decided to go out to get a Subway sandwich. I didn't even know Subway was open 24 hours, but apparently in Chicago, Subway is open 24 hours. I don't know who. I mean, there's obviously delivery services and things available to you. So why, when you're a actor, musician, I don't even know what kind of music he makes. I've never heard a song by him, but apparently he's a musician as well. That aside, why wouldn't you just order, Uber Eats, something like that, or, DoorDash? But no, 2 o'clock in the morning, sub-zero temperatures. He goes to Subway, of all places, to get a sandwich. I don't know who does that, but apparently actors who are wealthy and live in Chicago do that. So, and once again, if any of this is not making sense to you, chime in and let me know, because there's a lot of things that a lot of people wanted me to talk about. I have a whole notepad of notes here, so I'm going to try to hit all the points that people asked me to hit. So, and things get even more interesting. So, he claimed that he was going to the Subway, and he was walking back from the Subway, and two men yelled something to him about his race, and they yelled something to him. Now, it's the middle of the night, and they yelled something to him about his sexual orientation, an anti-gay comment. So maybe called him the N-word, and then said something about him being gay, a derogatory word that I won't repeat. That he said these attackers that he told the police were two white men. That's directly from the police report that he gave, and that detective gave that testimony in court. I believe it was yesterday, where she said they saw him in the hospital, and he said it was two white men. They were wearing masks, but he could tell in the opening of the mask that they were white. So two white men, he's walking down the street, they rush up to him, make an anti-black derogatory statement, an anti-gay derogatory statement, and also make a comment that they are pro Donald Trump, and apparently they said this is MAGA country, the N-word, and hit him. So, what I don't understand is, if you're a police officer, just right out of the gate, how you're not saying, wait a second, two guys see you walking down the street with your Subway sandwich at 2 o'clock in the morning, and without knowing you at all or knowing whatever, they are assuming your skin color, assuming your sexual orientation, and assuming your political affiliation from across the street or from down the block. How did they know all these things about you? So I believe his claim was that it was a premeditated thing. So the next thing that didn't add up to me was, if it was a premeditated thing, meaning that they knew who he was, so they knew he was a black actor, and they knew he was gay, and they also knew he was very liberal. So they knew all this about him, and he was outspoken against President Trump. So they knew all this. So knowing all that, they were waiting for him. However, what didn't add up was him going to Subway at 2 o'clock in the morning was not a common occurrence. Even he admitted this. So he was supposing and insinuating that two white men were literally waiting all night on a random night for him to come out of his apartment And then in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., they saw him appear and they said, this is our shot. We got him. So either they were waiting there for a matter of days or weeks for him to come out at an opportune time, or they just happened to get lucky. And the night that they were staking out his apartment building, he happened to, at 2 o'clock in the morning, feel like going out for a Subway sandwich. Hopefully it wasn't the tuna, because we now know that the tuna isn't tuna, and in fact contained no tuna, in fact contained like pork and chicken and all this stuff. So the poor pescatarians are like losing their mind. But that's another story. So goes, and now this attack occurs. He says he's hit. They make MAGA. They said this is MAGA country. They call him the N-word. They reference his sexual orientation. The next thing that struck me as odd that it seemed like no one asked about was they're in Chicago. Chicago, as anyone with the pulse knows, is a very, very liberal city. 83% of Chicago voted for Hillary Clinton. So when it comes to something like this happening, one might assume that if you're in, and this is no offense to people that live in these states, I'm just saying that if you asked a general person where they might think something like this might happen, I'm not saying it does happen in these places, but where it might happen, they might say Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. They might throw out states like that. However, I think if you ask anyone with a shred of intelligence, if they had to choose a city or state in which they think something like this would happen, I would say nobody would choose Chicago. Chicago has, as many of you know, a predominantly black population. 83% voted for Hillary Clinton, so clearly very liberal. So you wouldn't really choose Chicago at 2 o'clock in the morning for somewhere that two white supremacists would be sitting there hanging out in sub-zero temperatures, waiting for a black man to come out of his apartment on a random night to go grab a Subway sandwich and be prepared with stuff. Now let's talk about what they said. They knocked him down. They hit him. They called him, all these things. This is MAGA country. And one of them put a noose around his neck, and another one poured bleach on him. And then they ran off and got a taxi. That's correct. That's correct. The assailants didn't run into the darkness of the night. They ran, masked and all, and hailed a cab. They hailed a cab and they got out of there. So no one was asking the basic question of, how did they know you were coming out at 2 a.m. in the middle of the night, freezing, cold? Most people are sleeping. How did they know? And he didn't quite have an answer for this. And then it was like, who does a heinous attack like that and then gets into a taxi? Taxis can be tracked. The taxis all have GPS. Well, who did you pick up in that area? How did they pay for the fare? What did they look like? They would take a taxi. So no one was asking these questions, apparently. So, of course, he went on to the media and he was, doing the interviews, and he's talking to these high-level reporters, and all these reporters are just listening to him tell this story. And not a single one of them is saying, Jussie, let me ask you a question. These two white guys that just came out of the blue, like, how did they know you were coming? How did they know you were going to go out for a sandwich to Subway at 2 a.m.? How did they know you were a gay man? How did they know your political affiliation? And apparently one of them was wearing a red MAGA hat. Now, in Chicago, at 2 o'clock in the morning, once again, anyone with a pulse would probably not wear a red MAGA hat anywhere in downtown Chicago walking down the street. You can be shot and killed, and there's a very high likelihood of being shot and killed simply walking down the street in Chicago in broad daylight. We've seen it. But to be walking down the street in Chicago at 2 in the morning wearing a red MAGA hat as a white person, probably not be very intelligent. That being said, that was the story. No one questioned it. No one was saying anything. And these high-level reporters weren't asking him any questions at all. So what happened next? What happened next was the tour. The tour came going on all the news networks, and you had politicians at that time, Senator Kamala Harris putting out tweets, other celebrities putting out tweets and things like that about how this is, what the country is in 2019. It's horrible, this and that. Well, of course, come to find out, as the story progressed, things started to fall apart. And then ultimately, they discovered that the two men that attacked Jussie were not white men, but they were two brothers. They were black, Nigerian, so they're like Wesley Snipes black. And they were the ones that Jussie Smollett paid to attack him to stage this hate crime. Now, one of the brothers testified in court yesterday. I believe it was yesterday. And so these two brothers, they're personal trainers, bodybuilders, and they actually were personal trainers to Jussie Smollett. That's how he knew them. He got them some work working as extras on the set of Empire, doing stand-in stuff and things like that. So they had built a relationship. So essentially what happened, the real story, is he went to them after the anonymous letter he got didn't cause enough of a stir and people didn't respond the way he wanted. So he went to them and said, listen, I need you to do me a favor. And it needs to be on the, quote, down low. That's from the text message that was sent. And let's stop there for a second. Following the attack, the police asked Jussie Smollett for his cell phone to corroborate some of what he was saying, where he was. He said he was on the phone with his agent at 2 o'clock in the morning with Subway sandwich in hand. So Subway fake tuna sandwich in hand. He's talking to his agent at 2 o'clock in the morning. So there was a witness to the attack, right? So they said, well, we need to see your cell phone. We want to corroborate some of the things that you're telling us. And of course, he refused to provide his cell phone. Now, if you just got attacked by two MAGA hat wearing white men that put a noose around your neck, punched, kicked, and beat you, and poured bleach on you, that's a heinous act. And if the police are saying, listen, we want your cell phone so we can help solve this case and get some more details, and you say, no, I don't know how anyone didn't think that was a bit of a red flag. They're trying to help you. Why would you say no? Anyhow, that's how things start to fall apart. So now we fast forward. The two brothers, bodybuilders, personal trainers, he pays them $3,500 in a check, a personal check. Let me say that again. He gives them a personal check to stage the attack. He tells them, he gives them $100 cash, smart, to buy a red hat to look like a MAGA hat. He gave them cash to buy other items that they needed for this attack. Apparently, Jussie Smollett himself purchased the rope and the bleach, which they fashioned into a noose and put around his neck. And then he still had the noose around his neck when the police showed up, apparently, and the bleach. So that was that. Well, it comes out that these two guys, they did it, and the story started falling apart. So, of course, he gets charged with filing a false report. Of course, he filed a fake hate crime, which roughly they're saying 80-something, and this is according to the FBI, between 2005 and 2019, a little over 80% of hate crimes went they didn't get, the alleged perpetrators didn't get charged because there wasn't enough evidence to show that they were actual hate crimes that occurred, meaning based on the FBI stats, roughly 80% of hate crimes that were reported were actually not real hate crimes. So that's per the FBI. You can look that up. So, the story started falling apart. The brothers came forward and said that they had been paid and it was staged. And in fact, they found a video, I believe it was on Smollett's phone, or one of the other brothers' phone, that showed them the day before the attack doing a dry run, practicing the attack. They actually had like bands practice, and, in theater, they have rehearsals. They had a rehearsal for the 2 a.m. freezing cold attack, just so they made sure they got the details right. Okay, you're going to hit me here, you're going to kick me here. Maybe there's some WWE style, choreography in there, just in case there was some surveillance videos. But they had a rehearsal, a dry run the night before. And then they did it the night of. Okay, so none of it added up. None of it made sense. No one was questioning it. Now here we are. He gets charged. Well, after he gets charged with filing this false report for this fake staged crime that he paid these guys to do, you have this strange thing happen. An aide to Michelle Obama reaches out to a woman named Kim Fox, who's the prosecutor in Chicago, and has the charges for him filing a false report and filing a fake hate crime report dropped. Now, in the world of people saying that there's oppression and all these other things, here you have someone who can't find any kind of oppression or any kind of racial thing in his world at all to document and say, hey, there's racism going on here where I live, and this is bad. Here's proof. He couldn't find anything. Nothing was happening to him during his daily travels. So he had to pay two brothers, Nigerian bodybuilders, $3,500 to make it happen, fabricate it. But not only that, you on the back end, when you get caught for fabricating the hate crime, utilize your position and power as a black man to reach out to the wife of a former president who gets a phone call made to the prosecutor to have your charges dropped. I gotta tell you, that's a nice privilege to have. I wish I had the privilege of such power to call the wife of a former president and say, hey, can you do me a favor? I got these charges against me for something pretty serious. I'm looking at like 3 years in jail. Can you do me a favor? Yeah, no problem, Jussie. I'll take care of it. Hey, Kim, those Jussie Smollett charges, I know he faked the hate crime and, he made a big deal about it and they all didn't really happen. Listen, we need to drop these charges. Okay, cool. Thanks, Kim. You're the best. Thanks. Great. Boom. That's some privilege, right? You and I don't have that privilege. So he utilized that. Anyway, the charges came back and here he is in court. Now, this is the best part of the story. In court, Jussie Smollett's attorneys are making him out to be the victim here. Like, not the victim of the hate crime, but the victim of this whole situation. And they're saying that he is really the oppressed person here, and he is in no way at fault here. In fact, he's saying the two brothers who have the check from Jussie Smollett for $3,500. I don't know if in the memo area Jussie wrote for faking beating me up or fake MAGA hate crime. I don't know if he wrote that in the memo or not. I don't know if he went that far, but they had the check, right? And there were, I guess, some receipts and some other things. And then there was the video of them practicing, rehearsing the event. Despite all of that, this attorney has the audacity to say, these two brothers did this to Jussie out of jealousy. They were jealous of his success. They were jealous of his position on the show, Empire, and all these things. And that they did this to him out of jealousy. And as incredible as the first story that Jussie Smollett told the police, noose around his neck, covered in bleach, of what happened, this sounds even more incredible. And once again, of course, the media is not talking about it because they don't want you to hear about this craziness. It would just make everything look bad, and it would make most of the narratives going on out there fall completely apart. Meanwhile, nobody that defended it, Jussie, like, Kamala Harris and all these other people, all these celebrities that, swooped in and made all these tweets and statements and all that. After it came out that he had faked it, none of them had the guts to come back and say, I was wrong. This is an embarrassment and he should be charged to the full extent. No, rather, they all kind of just talked around this because they couldn't go against the narrative that's out there, which is in Chicago, which is 83% voted for Hillary Clinton, a hugely liberal city that is crime-ridden, falling apart. It's just like a war zone, and anyone who knows anything knows that. There's people walking around. There's two men in the middle of the night, white men, walking around in ski masks, wearing red MAGA hats on top of their ski hats, putting nooses on people's neck and pouring bleach on them, and yelling racial and homophobic slurs and telling them that this is MAGA country. In Chicago, 83% Hillary Clinton. Liberal cities, they don't get any more liberal. That's what's happening in Chicago. That's what they want you to believe. So they can't go back and say that, right? So the lawyers for Jussie Smollett are saying that these brothers did this on their own. Now, despite the videotape of the rehearsal the night before, despite the check that was given to them, which he says was for, personal training services, and despite the fact that there's purchase receipts of the rope and the bleach that lead back to Smollett. So these two guys were jealous of him and attacked him. They just happened to attack him with the rope and the bleach that he bought. I don't know how some of these attorneys do their job and do it. I don't know how they put this BS out there in a courtroom. Two, I don't know how after they leave the courtroom how they go home and put their head down on the pillow at night and just go to sleep and thinking like they're not doing anything wrong. It is absolutely mental. And anyone watching this who doesn't think it's mental, you might be mental. So anyway, we have the trial. We don't know what's going to happen. He's looking at 3 years. And it's really, it's going maybe to a jury and seeing or judge and seeing what happens. Is he going to go to jail for 3 years? I think we all know he's not going to go to jail for 3 years. Pretty much everyone knows that's not going to happen. Is he going to go to jail at all? I don't know. If I had to guess, I'm a betting man, which I'm not. But if I was, I would say he's probably not going to see the inside of a jail cell at all. And it's not going to be a surprise. It's no surprise. It wouldn't come as a surprise to me, and I'm sure it wouldn't come as a surprise to many of you because we all know how these things go. If you are looking at 3 years and you already had the aide to the wife of a former president make a phone call to get some charges dropped, you're probably not going to see any jail time. You had Michelle Obama's aide make a phone call for you to the prosecutor. You're probably not going to do any jail time. We all know how this is going to work. Anyway, the defense attorneys are just throwing anything against the wall and trying to create, this is it's like a Shaggy moment, right? Like they have the video of them rehearsing the attack the night before. And Shaggy, it wasn't me. Called me in the shower on the bathroom floor, it wasn't me. So the defense attorney is watching this video of his client and these two men, black men, not white men. Listen, Jussie, if you're going to do this, if you're going to stage an attack and stage a hate crime, and you're going to pay $3,500, why wouldn't you pay two white guys to do it? Why would you pay two Nigerian guys to do it. Not to say that, like, paying anyone to do it is right. Obviously, it's disgusting. But you didn't even have the sense to pay white guys, just in case if they were running away, or maybe when they got in the cab driver would come back and say, like, yeah, that was me. I picked up these two white guys. It looked like they were just running away from some black guy on the ground with a noose around his neck and bleach all over him. You paid two black guys to do it. But he told the police that they were white guys, so that all fell apart, which I don't know how the defense attorney went around that. The defense attorney knows that his client told the police that the two attackers were white guys. So now he's trying to say that the two brothers did this on their own. They did this on their own. They were lying in wait for Jussie to come out for his tuna sandwich from Subway at 2 o'clock in the morning. And they attacked him because they hated him. But they didn't just beat him up because they didn't like him, which is what most, adults do, right? Like we're like schoolyard children. Someone we don't like or someone we're jealous of, we just sit in the freezing temperatures 2 until 2 in the morning, and we wait for them to just happen to be going out for a Subway sandwich, and then we pounce on them. But we don't just beat them up and run away like you would do in the schoolyard. No, we have to do it in a manner that makes us look like white supremacists, Trump supporters. And we have to make it look like a hate crime. You just can't beat them up. It has to be this whole thing. And that's why they did it. They wanted to stage that somehow. And that's the defense attorney's story. And he's sticking to it. God bless that person, man, woman, whoever. So anyway, what most people are not recognizing, and this is the culmination of this, is I feel so really blessed, and most people should, that we live in a country that is so free. Now, I'm not saying zero, because we all know there are things that happen in this country that are simply wrong. Some of them are not just wrong, they're absolutely horrid and disgusting. However, we're in a situation where someone, a black man, who is looking to get some attention and looking for something negative to happen to him based on the color of his skin, literally can't find it. Literally can't find it in everyday life. So he has to go pay, not two white people, but he has to go pay two black people to fake it and make it look like that. And of course, we got to pin it on a former president that we want to say is all these things. If it really was that bad, and as bad as some people are making it out to be, how bad it was, then I would think as a black man, it wouldn't be too hard to just go out and be attacked by MAGA hat wearing white supremacists. But apparently, it's so hard and so uncommon and so difficult that you have to go pay $3,500 to two black Nigerian brothers to do it. Think about the lunacy of that. You are trying to prove that something exists so badly, but you can't. So now you have to go pay thousands of dollars to fake it, to prove that it exists. That alone might be the craziest thing about this that no one really is getting and no one's really understanding. Now, the other thing is, and I'll end on this, incidents like this only hurt people of color because it's the boy who cried wolf. So if this were to actually happen to a person of color, something egregious like this, but you have this high-profile Jussie Smollett case that everyone now knows about, although they're not talking about the court case that's really being hush-hush and not being televised, all this. That's aside the point. What does it do to that person who's a real victim of a hate crime? It's going to make the police question. It's going to make people who don't have any ill feeling toward people of color, it might make them question, this is another Jussie Smollett, what's going on here? What is this? Is it real? Did it really happen? It's okay to ask questions when you're investigating a crime. And if things don't add up, it's okay to dig a little deeper. We all have a brain in between our ears, I believe. And if you have questions or something doesn't seem right, it's okay to ask questions. That's not victim blaming or not believing a victim in any way, shape, or form. I had to ask many questions to victims and witnesses and stuff in my time investigating crimes that sometimes were uncomfortable. Sometimes you had to ask the uncomfortable questions. Someone was beat up, or someone got robbed. You had to ask. You say, do you owe anyone money? Are you in any debt? Do you have any gambling debt? Things like that. Now, that's not a question you want to ask someone who just got robbed and their house got broken into and someone happened to know that they had thousands of dollars in their safe or they had gold or silver bars, whatever it may be. But you have to ask those questions to dig a little deeper. And if you see things that don't add up, there's no signs of forced entry. Okay, so you're telling me that you have all this expensive stuff and whatever, but your safe was unlocked and there's no signs of forced entry, so it means you left your door unlocked. Doesn't quite add up, sir. Doesn't quite add up, ma'am. So these are the things that it apparently wasn't done. Maybe the police started putting two and two together at some point and clearly things unfolded. But it's okay. A lot of people are like, oh, you're attacking the victim. That's not attacking the victim. That's doing your job. And that's just not blindly believing some crazy that story that's so outlandish that you just go, you're taking it for face value. It hurts people of color. It's the boy who cried wolf. And you don't want that. You don't want that. Thank God these things aren't happening. Now, the last note to close is I'm someone who monitors the news, and a lot of the people in my circle monitor the news very, very closely. I can't remember the last time I heard of an actual event that occurred to a person of color on this magnitude that Jussie Smollett fabricated. I don't recall. Once again, I'm not saying something horrendous hasn't happened to a man or woman of color out there somewhere in this country, a disgusting act of racism or a hate crime. I hope it hasn't, but I'm saying that if it has, to any degree, we haven't heard about it. And I think in this day and age, where everything's right on our phone, and news is constant, things are pushing out there, and we have a media that everyone now knows is pushing a certain narrative. I think I think you'll agree, if an incident like that did happen, it would be national news. I don't care if it happened to a nobody person in a podunk town. Once it hit the news wire, that story would spread like wildfire. If a black man anywhere in the United States was legitimately attacked and a noose was put around their neck and a bleach was poured on them and anti-Trump statements were made to that person and anti-gay and anti-black and all these other things were made to him. If it just happened to Joe Smith in the middle of, Springville, USA, you better believe that would be on every news network 24/7 for probably a week straight. We know that. They would jump on that. And it would be the biggest story, especially if the MAGA thing was rolled into there and they were wearing red MAGA hats, the attackers. We know this. We haven't seen it. We haven't seen that in the news. So you could take from that, it hasn't happened. Thank God it hasn't happened. Thank God it hasn't happened. And that makes me feel good because I feel like, for the most part, Americans are good. And the things that you're hearing and the division that's trying to be created simply isn't true. You ask most people who are going around this country and they have no problem with anyone. They're busy with their own stuff. They're trying to put food on their table. They're broke. They're trying to get more money in the bank. They got all kinds of issues. Most people could care less about the people. Are there the 1% that secretly have their little meetings and their little groups and have their feelings about, people who look like this or people who look like this or people of this religion? Of course there are. Of course those people exist. And those people are always going to exist. There's no utopia. Those people are always going to exist in the shadows. And that's where we hope they stay. We hope they stay in the shadows. Most of them are cowards. So that's where they'll remain in the shadows. And that's why we haven't seen that national headline of something like that horrific happening. Because if it did, we would see it. So thank God we haven't. The only time we've seen it is when someone had to fake it and fabricate it. Because it simply just wasn't happening to that person in real life. So, there we have it. Let me know in the comments what you think the real negative effects of Jussie Smollett faking this hate crime are. Because there's ripple effects to actions like this. What are they? How do they adversely affect people of color? How do they adversely affect Caucasian people? How does this incident have ripple effects that most people are not talking about? Some of them I mentioned here. I'd love to know. So comment below, and as always, remember, you want to, all fake attacks aside, I always tell people, when you're walking around at 2 o'clock in the morning, Subway sandwich in hand, be mindful of your surroundings. And if you happen to see 2 masked people wearing MAGA hats running towards you, yelling racial, homophobic, and anti-conservative slurs, don't just stand there holding sandwich. Run. Run to somewhere that's lit. Maybe like the Subway that you just got your sandwich from, and there's a clerk inside, and it's well lit. Run. Call 911. You don't just sit there and wait for the people to come up to you and then accost you. Always have your head on a swivel. Always, and texting while you're walking around. Keep your head up. Get your head out of your phone. All right. So we hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you comment, and you can email. Obviously, email in. There's an email link on the website 221betactical.com of what you want to hear more about. Any news stories, things that aren't being talked about in the media, things that you think should be talked about in the media, or something that is being talked about in the media, but you don't feel like it's being talked about in the way that the details that should be coming out. So either way, you could share that. Make sure you click that like button if you like this video. If not, you don't like this video, please, you can click that thumbs down button, because that helps the algorithm too. So you do that, and make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, turn on notifications, so when more of this comes out, you can, know immediately. You get the ding on your phone, and we'll go from there. Okay. Thank you for watching. Be safe. Wash your hands. There's some kind of new thing going on. Get your 6th shot. Put your 3 masks on. Be safe. See you.